one of the things I really like about the club is that we can be anywhere and have a conversation. As if you notice my backgrounds in the past, I am no longer in Blenheim. I'm in a small town of Collingwood in New Zealand. A wonderful place, by the way. I don't know if you've been there, Tiffany, and all, but it's very artsy and it's right next to Takaka and very artsy community and just a wonderful place to be. But evidently, they have a horrible internet connection to my little boutique motel. Tiffany, on the other hand, is in Bangladesh. Now, you would think that Bangladesh might not have the same internet connectivity that I've got, which is awful. But believe it or not, Tiffany's got some wonderful internet connectivity. So that being said, without further ado, I'm going to get off the screen and hand the podium to Tiffany. Tiffany, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you. That is an interesting observation that you make about internet quality in two different countries. My name's Tiffany. I'm from New Zealand originally. I'm actually from South Canterbury and then grew up in Dunedin. So very familiar with Otago, Dunedin and Otago. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about my background and how the long winding story of how I ended up being in Bangladesh right now. And then the relevance of that to this club that I really wanted to be connected to and be a part of. So I think one of the big influences in my life was living overseas as a youngster. I lived in Indonesia when I was 12 for a year because my father was doing research there. And so that had a huge, profound influence on me in terms of my openness and curiosity about other cultures to start off with. So I lived a very immersive year where I was doing my schoolwork to New Zealand by correspondence to New Zealand, but at the same time I was absorbed in learning the local language and really, really interested about how different things could be, how people could live so differently. And so I took that with me, I think, that initial curiosity. And then throughout high school, I went to Japan when I was 14 or 15, went to an international art camp when I was that age. And then when I was 19, I first went to China. And then I subsequently, throughout my undergraduate degree, which was in cultural anthropology, every year I was lucky enough to be connected through the business school. I was connected to being a part of several film projects that were funded through the business school, so to China. So I was going back and forth to China working on these documentary film projects. So my undergraduate degree was in cultural anthropology. I majored in anthropology. So you can sort of see a thread in my life of just huge interest in culture and cross-cultural perspectives, and of really putting myself in different contexts and just wanting to be there and just observe, which is very much the mandate of ethnographic fieldwork and what cultural anthropologists like to do a lot. So I had a lot of this experience. And then, so finished my degree in cultural anthropology, and I always knew I wanted to do further graduate study in anthropology, but at the same time, I didn't want to rush that too much. So I wanted to make sure that if I did a PhD, I wanted to know that you have to be committed, right? So I wanted to know that I was going to be, able to sustain interest in a topic. So before I started that, I actually worked in the Higher Education Development Centre at Otago for a number of years. And that was really good experience because it was it's an intersection of education and development, specifically higher education, but just, the roles of teachers and learners in the whole process of the context of higher education, but the use of technology and media and films and all of these things. So that was sort of coupled with anthropology as well. And that's funny how it's sort of come back around in a big circle. So I worked there for a couple of years, and then I started, I went to China and lived there for about 2 years before I then started my PhD. So I ended up doing my ethnographic work in China, and that was on a topic related to religious pluralism, really, but it was quite a philosophical perspective that I was taking. So I was looking at Buddhist and Sufi and Taoist influences on a particular Sufi community in northwest China. So I ended up being in China for about 3 or 4 years in total to do that work. And then after I finished that PhD project, I was a little bit, by the time, there was about 7 years of being immersed in the world of words. So a very, very long time of just being absorbed in that. And so an opportunity came up to teach filmmaking, digital filmmaking, at this women's university in Chittagong, Bangladesh. And I'd never heard of this university, but it was through an NGO in New York. And I talked to them and they said, oh, we've got a potential placement at this women's university in Bangladesh. Would you be interested in that? And I had been to India before, I'd been to South Asia before, and really loved it, but I'd never imagined potentially living there in the long term. But when this opportunity came up, it was for 10 months, and I said, yes, I'd love to do that. I'll give it a go. Sounds really interesting. So I said yes, and I came over here for 10 months, and that was 2015, and it's 2018 now, and I'm still here. So a 10-month contract turned into a much, much longer term full-time faculty position here, a long-term teaching contract here. And so hence I'm still here now. And so during the time, should I stop there for a second? Should I keep going?
Keep going, yeah.
And so I guess during the time that I've been here, I've had the opportunity to develop a number of my own courses. So I teach in the humanities. I teach the core courses for sort of first and second year students, but occasionally for third and fourth year students. But most of my courses are all related to anthropology in some way. So at the moment, I'm teaching an applied anthropology course called Applied Anthropology and Contemporary Issues, and another one on the anthropology of mental health, so cross-cultural perspectives on mental health, which is a huge sort of global relevance right now too. So I'm really, really loving, they're 2 social analysis courses, so I'm really enjoying teaching them, and the students have so much to talk about. So in the course of teaching these sorts of topics and talking about these sorts of topics, the relevance of the work that Rotary do in particular came to the forefront for me, because I could really see so much intersection in terms of the whole development sector and what a lot of my students are working in directly themselves. So I'm very much coming at all of these issues, particularly to do with ROSRAG and water and sanitation, from the perspective of someone who's right in the midst of the education sector and working with young women from all across Asia talking about these issues. So I guess my perspective is not as a scientist or as an engineer on these sorts of things, but it's coming from that perspective, education sector, and particularly women's voices and women's roles in cultural change and development, in relation to a whole host of issues, but obviously with relevance to this club, specifically hygiene and sanitation issues as well. So I'm really passionate, I guess, about just intersecting, getting all these voices to speak to each other. So sitting and listening to people in this group who are highly, highly experienced engineers and hydrologists and geologists, and all of the really important work that they do, and trying to offer my own perspective, from in terms of, the cultural aspects of this work, be my priority.
So it seems that with your experience with China and just traveling in general, that you've sort of become more of a cultural chameleon, if you will. Do you see yourself kind of going into it? How do you get into a culture and become one? Do you go through any sort of cultural shock, or how do you actually kind of begin to merge in that culture and become kind of relevant to the rest of the community? It's kind of strange too by saying that, because you're really still an academic community, so there's a certain kind of a set of ethos, if you will, meaning that that community. Have you been able to look outside the community itself into the happenings in Chittagong and becoming able to merge with that cultural group?
I think probably not as much as I would like to, because there's a few inherent barriers. One of them is being fluent in the local language in this specific context. So my own training was in the Chinese context. So here it's very much because we teach in English and English is the lingua franca in the university, and I know a little bit of Bangla, but I'm not in a position to, go out and speak in that language to do any direct work myself. But that's what we talk about a lot with the students, because so many of us are not from here. So for us to actually do work in the local context, we have to think collaboratively and we have to work as a team and pull on all of our experiences and strengths. And also there's like safety issues and things as well for women in this part of the world. And particularly I'm very conspicuous. All of us as foreigners, we're very conspicuous in this kind of cultural context. So we have to be careful around where we go and how we go and who we go with. So my interactions, like my hope here is that I can work with organizations like the local Rotary organizations that are here, and just within the networks from the university and kind of spreading out into those sorts of organizations to offer the connections that I can through that. But it's definitely, if you were going to do research or get heavily involved in development here, you'd have to be part of a team really to make that work.
I've always seen that, when I've done work in developing countries, mainly around the Spanish, what have you. So I'm sort of a prisoner to my translator a lot of times, even though I know a little Spanish. I'll inevitably become a prisoner because they really are the ones that are your intercessory to the community and are your filter. So they can actually change the message at their discretion. And you have to be real sensitive sometimes in terms of how that message might be broadcast to the user. Have you watched your peers, whether it's in Bangladesh or in China, and how they actually work with the community and developing relationships?
Yes, I have. Certainly, like my Chinese colleagues or friends and my close Bangladeshi friends as well. Like that's an interesting thing to observe, just how the local customs are in terms of who can you be friends with, how do you sustain that relationship, what sort of things do you do to build up those sorts of connections.
Can you give me examples of various little traps you might fall into, or just various mores that you need to be sensitive to in Bangladesh?
Something I've noticed here is, well, I've noticed this as well in China too, that you don't say thank you. Don't say thank you to people that you're friends with, which seems sort of contradictory, but they always react to me like, no, don't thank me. If you have to thank me, then you don't sort of appreciate the depth of our connection. Like I don't mind you. I don't mind doing this for you, kind of thing. So don't externally acknowledge it. Just take it. And I noticed that in China as well. So some aspects of how you show gratitude to someone is a reflection of the quality of that relationship. I guess that's one thing I've noticed.
So that's really interesting because you've been in China, you've been in Bangladesh. When you go in there, is there, from your past experience, is there a way that you see yourself merging into that culture, and how you prepare yourself, or how do you become that cultural chameleon? How do you go in there and understand relationships, and how do you conduct yourself before you get asked to be part of that community or try to do things in the community?
I guess from From doing a lot of long-term ethnographic fieldwork as well, this is like the question you ask is a really big question that you ask yourself every day when you're doing fieldwork, because people ask it to you all the time, like, who are you, where are you from, why have you come here? Because you're quite unusual, you know, especially if you're by yourself and you've taken yourself to a really remote region. Obviously people are going to be asking you these things, so it's something that you have to think internally. Okay, so ask yourself all those questions as well, like, who am I, why am I here, what do I hope to achieve by being here, and have thought through that enough so that when people do ask you those inevitable questions, you are able to say something. So in this context, like, I am I'm a researcher and a teacher. That's essentially the two things that I am. And I just come from a very, very humble attitude of, you know, humble and genuine sort of place. I am very interested to know about other people's lives, and potentially through that understanding to try and contribute in some way, either contribute to our shared collective, you know, experiences of being here together, or to help take something back home, or to give something back to the community. So I just try and engage at the most genuine level I possibly can, and I don't really carry any particular agendas with me. It's just a very human basis.
You know, it's really interesting. As we initially talked before this conversation of yours, uh, I talked about needs assessment analysis, and one of the things we do is not just understanding, you know, the problems in the community, whether they're certain pathogens you're trying to chase, you know, technologies that you want to use or whatever. But part of it really is in these workshops is building a relationship with the community. You know, there's so many of us go into these communities as Westerners, and we assume that we're there, that they all automatically understand that we're there to help them out. Sometimes you can look at this like the big elephant parade coming in that they've got to tolerate, you know, and then if they just satisfy us, we'll leave, and things will get back to normal. And I think the big issue is to learn how to work with the community, really really understand their needs, as well as the issues, and, you know, the social structures, and who's going to be managing, and how does it work, and especially when we talk about women, you know, even in a patriarchal community, how do you get the stakeholders involved, which are the women, right? I know I've been around long enough to understand, but even within that, if I'm working with a patriarchal cultural group, I've got to find a way of convincing those leaders that they need to involve women and all that stuff. So the idea of becoming this kind of cultural chameleon to me is a very major element of doing a needs assessment analysis, because I'm really there to develop a relationship, and from there begin to listen to them. I think we have a tendency to tell them what they need, and not necessarily listen to what they feel they need. And if we tell them what they need and they don't have the ability to provide input, they really don't take ownership, because to them, we're not listening. And so, you know, your part of, you know, on the education side and all that stuff is incredibly relevant as far as I'm concerned when it gets down to doing water projects, or really any humanitarian project. It's all part of that problem seeking portion of getting started and really understanding how to make a project sustainable. Because if you don't engage the community, if you don't understand how the community operates, you'll never be able to get them involved enough to take ownership. If they don't take ownership, the project is not sustainable, because ultimately you're going to leave. And the question really is who's going to keep the project going.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, what you're doing, you know, and listening to Jessica talk, and Beatrice and all that stuff, I get real excited, because I really see an inner core that really is relevant to doing water projects, go way beyond the technical side. It's very easy for us as engineers, academics, to kind of focus in on our specialty, To get
Mm.
really soft elements that really make things sustainable. So
Mm.
I'm excited about that. I was kind of wondering, do you think now? Here's my hook for you. At some point in time, we've had the forums, with Jessica, Beatrice, and you, and all that. I think at some point in time, we've
Mm.
got to be able to develop a core module in that's part of a needs assessment analysis that
Mm.
begins to take that cultural assimilation. In other words, as we volunteer and come in, we leave our baggage, our Western baggage at the airplane and learn how to assimilate into the culture. And I was wondering
Mm.
if you all, this is my hook for you, by the way, begin to think about that and develop that.
Mm.
Waha.
Yeah, no, I'd be very keen. I'd be absolutely keen to do that. I remember that at the end of the forum in December, where we were last talking, and that was one of the possible outcomes, I think, that came out of that conversation was because we were talking about gender and power within development projects. And yeah, we came up with that similar suggestion of possibly creating a module or a participatory workshop that everybody that we put forward as a model that we recommend people go through or put their teams through before they start the implementation of a project, asking a list of really, really important questions at the beginning of that process.
Yeah, it might be something that you, Beatrice, and Jessica begin talking about.
Yeah,
And finding, and Nancy too. It,
yeah.
it's so important because, again, a lot of times when you walk, I've at least realized when I walk into developing countries, I get
Mm.
a kind of patriarchal, kind of an organizational structure.
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, I can look at the corner of my eye and I can see the women, and I know they're the stakeholders, and they're watching very intently. Now, I've been
Mm.
fortunate in my work that I've been involved on this one community for about 10 years. I've actually had the women bubble up where they actually are the leaders in their villages, and they're the ones that will kind of keep an eye on what's happening. And they,
Mm.
as they remind the technicians, they are the bosses. And the men don't quite like that. But the reality is that they're the ones that take care of the family, and they have obligations and issues about health and family and all that are very relevant to them. So they have that ownership. They really understand it. Sometimes the men are just kind of transient in nature.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was thinking about that. I think it's really important that you all begin to think about that we really do need that core element. It's got to be part of the needs assessment analysis. Whoever's conducting that piece and beginning the project or facilitating a project really has got to get through that part of the issue to really begin to start the project. This is how do I actually make my project relevant to the community? And
Mm.
if I don't assimilate the community where they're actually having a dialogue with me instead of just feeling that they get a monologue from me and I'm just telling them what I'm going to give them and not really getting input from them.
Mm.
That's one side of the coin. I really want that honest dialogue where they can just tell me I'm crazy if I am, or whatever. But at the same time, is making the facilitator sensitive to the users that he's talking to, and understanding who occupies what role in the process, and
Mm.
whether that person can actually carry on that role, whether it's an educator or a technician or whatever. But definitely, in there, women, as you all have said, and you're right, women play a major part of that role. And if they don't, it's probably not going to be sustainable.
Mm.
Just
Something. No, I was going to say something else that, like a lot of my students, and particularly in the applied anthropology class, one of the projects they have to do is they all have to take a contemporary issue. It might be to do with overpopulation or climate change or sanitation, hygiene. I have had a couple of projects about that. And they have to propose some hypothetical research, say that an NGO or a government wanted to, get a better idea of how this problem was playing out and what the real needs were. And so they hire this applied anthropologist to go in and do a long-term sort of qualitative analysis, really, of what's going on. And then the students have to develop a possible research project, and then a lot of them come up with a list of recommendations just naturally. By the end of the report, they just produce like, okay, so in my opinion, I think this is what they should do. They should da-da-da-da-da-da. And it might be students talking about the refugee crisis and urban slums, and like every week they're discussing these sorts of things. And so I would personally love to do something a little bit more with the work that they produce. So like I'm generating a little pile of, they're student recommendations, and it's a student projects. But I still think that within that material, there are wonderful ideas and very, very lots and lots of local knowledge, in lots of different cultural contexts that I wonder if I could do something more with. And then just when thinking about the Wash and Women Forum and contextualizing practice and development practice all the time, I'm just wondering if there's a way to share, develop an online journal where that could be shared, or if Rotary has a place where that kind of knowledge could be shared. I'm not sure about that, but it'd be great to kind of intersect that a little bit more, yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, it'd be really interesting to see for your students if, let's say, they got a project with refugees. If there's an individual that had been a refugee, or maybe somebody who's working with an NGO that deals with refugees, or somebody to be a sounding board for them, so they actually bounce their ideas and see how relevant they are. Yeah, just here's my idea. What do you think? You see what you throw it against the wall and it sticks. Because sometimes it's one thing for us to be in an ivory tower in an academic setting and make these recommendations. It's another thing to give it to the actual individual in that situation.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Understand whether or not they feel it's relevant. Because they might find out there's certain issues that we have not thought about, whether it's logistics or economics or whatever it is. Religious, cultural. There are a lot of things that we don't really take into account. And that's what I'm saying. Even for us as Westerners going into a culture, I know I give a great example in Haiti after the earthquake. People came in to try to solve the housing problems in Haiti post earthquake, and so you had all these people coming from all these various countries all over the world, and they were building these temporary housing. Well, which was great for shelter, except that culturally, Haiti was known for mystique or voodoo. The joke around Haiti is, a large percentage are Catholic. There's a percentage that's Protestant, but everybody's voodoo. And one of the big issues for them was at night they truly believe the spirits walk the earth. And if you had a building with openings and no shutters, the spirits come into your house. So they saw all these shelters being built with these openings that the locals are like, oh my God, my great grandmother's gonna come in, she's gonna haunt me the rest of my life. And they would not go into those buildings unless they had shutters at all. And it took a while for people to fully appreciate it. But it's a small anecdote, but the idea basically was really understanding the cultural elements that my culture is different than your culture. Now my history and all that stuff is different. Doesn't mean I'm better. It just means I'm different, and that's part of the baggage I carry when I come to work with you. So, but it'd be really neat for you all to work with it. I rambled too much, but you got me really thinking about some really great things. I'm watching my fuzzy face as my terrible internet connectivity is showing off that yours is much better than mine. But anyway, thank you very much. It's been really enlightening, and I hope it's just a one way of everybody kind of getting to know you and hopefully we'll be able to strike up more conversations. I know that you and Jessica and Beatrice have been talking, and I think it's really wonderful. Hopefully, we all as a club begin to communicate with each other more and share our skill sets and realize our various strengths, and hopefully it'll work out the best. Thanks, Tiffany.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll get in touch with Jessica and Beatrice.
All good.
Okay, all good. Thank you.